We're talking defense at Florida State here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, with Logan Robinson from Knoll Game Day. So, Florida State fans, if you have no idea that we do this every Tuesday night, you've been missing out for like over a year. Every Tuesday night, Logan and I get together, Jason Parker as well, James Coleman, to talk Florida State football, 7 o'clock Eastern time right here. That's why you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live. But we got Logan right now to break down the Florida State defense. Logan, I know you're excited despite these stats. 90th in total defense last year, number 119 out of 130 teams. And I don't totally buy into the stats because it's a aggregate number of yardage given up. So if you're leading in games, the other team's going to pass. So it's not necessarily accurate. But when you're number 119 in passing yards given up, that's typically not a good place to be.
Yeah, no, that just doesn't sound too positive right there. We might just immediately, have a little bit of depressive feelings there. But that's why we're going to move along and be excited about this new defense, which I think has the potential to be to move up. It has the potential to most certainly be a top 25 defense. And we'll get into it, but there's just too much talent. But going back and looking back at last year, Florida State has been on a bad run with the whole Charles Kelly and obviously Barnett and, third and Kelly. Now we had a third and Barnett. We hope there's not a third and Fuller because that has a nice ring to it, but we don't really want to ever say that ever. So we'll see. But I think we're going to talk some good stuff here talent-wise that Florida State is projected to bring back.
Yeah, so let's start up front. When you look at the defensive front, is it up to FSU standards?
Yeah, I think it's going to be all right. I think everything's going to be okay. Some news that happened earlier today or yesterday, depending on when this goes out, but Fabian Lovett, obviously a transfer from Mississippi State, just got granted his waiver into FSU, which is a great addition for that defensive line. It just helps a lot in depth. He's not projected to really be a true starter, but he's going to move into rotations where if, a guy is hindered or needs some time or whatever, or just whenever you're switching in between packages, he is going to play a lot of snaps, and he's got a good talent on him too. A lot of FSU fans are excited about having him on the board, but it's hard to start any talking defensive line at FSU without talking about the true guy, the leader, the biggest guy coming into the season, nationally known, Marvin Wilson. I'm really excited for him. He's down to 305. He came into FSU weighing 330 pounds. He already, I went to a lot of the practices early on. Marvin Wilson was already the fastest guy on the defensive line, and he weighed a good, gigantic amount more than a few of those guys that were there. And that shouldn't be happening. I mean, he's just an athletic freak. It's not a hit to the other guys, but he's just an athletic freak. He's kind of got a smaller little build of his legs more than his upper torso, so maybe that's why he's got a little bit more agileness and able to move his hips a little bit faster than the others. But Marvin Wilson is expected to have a big season. Is he going to get overloaded with a few defensive or offensive linemen? Most certainly, yes. But he's had a lot of good plays, obviously, throughout his career, but he's had a lot of execution with being able to handle those guys. The thing, though, is that Corey Durden and Robert Cooper are here for another season. So that might open up a lot of time for him to bully kids and kind of sling them off of him. He had a good game last year against a first rounder. I don't remember the name, but I believe it was a Louisville player that went first round. He had a good game, a pretty decent game. Who flung him? I can't remember his name.
Becton.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. He had a pretty decent game. So he has flashes against some strong talent that's a starting NFL offensive lineman. So Marvin Wilson expect to have a big year. Corey Durden comes back. Stud. He thinks he's not being talked about enough, which is understandable for sure. He had some good stats last year, had a lot of flashy plays too. He can really get to the quarterback, and I think it's going to cause a lot of havoc, just those two on the defensive line as a whole. But you throw in Robert Cooper too, who I think has really shut off some bad weight too. Is able to, if he can be a little bit more shifty, He was already one of the strongest, if not the strongest, on the team the last couple of seasons. If he can get in there and get moving and use those legs a little bit more, and feel a little bit more in shape than anything, I think he could really be a true factor in creating some nastiness. They called themselves the Mob last year. The Mob returns again for a second season. And those four guys, I think, are going to lay a big impact for FSU. A fifth guy maybe to throw in there for honorable mention that a lot of FSU fans are kind of wanting to get some production out of is True Thompson. Him and Robert Cooper are by far probably the strongest guys. But from what we've heard since spring, he looks pretty solid and things are ready to rock and roll for him. So look for him to be in that early rotation.
Just to run down the numbers, Wilson, 8.5 tackles for loss, 5 sacks on 44 tackles. Cooper at 5 tackles for loss, a couple sacks, 40 tackles. And Durden, 6.5 tackles for loss and 5 sacks. So especially with Durden and Wilson's production last year, they might be going north of 10 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, possibly with a little bit more production out of those two. So going to linebacker, I think for the most part, this has been a downgrade in recent years from Florida State standards. So do you have hope for 2020?
Yeah, and this probably might be my favorite position since the spring started, and we started seeing some developmental things on the outside of like the weight room, conditioning, and guys getting built, because we've talked about it, Mark, I believe multiple times, of these linebackers have looked like they're defensive backs. I mean, you look at LSU, you look at Alabama, look at Texas, Clemson. I mean, Florida State's linebackers the last couple of seasons, and I hope people in the comments, they'll agree too, they have looked like defensive backs. I mean, Florida State, Dontavius Jackson was your biggest cat, I think, maybe Leonard Warner, but everybody's going to think Dontavius Jackson. But let me just remind you of Nick Moody, Reggie Northrup, Christian, who am I thinking here? Christian Jones. I mean, we can go even farther back to Ernie Sims, but that's even more mean of how ridiculous how different these players look nowadays. So Chris Marv comes from Mississippi State, your new linebackers head coach, young. Him and Coach Atkins, both young. He's coming in, and he's hopefully going to change this linebacker group. There is a lot of optimism there. Like I said, leaving another SEC team, comes over to come coach under Mike Norvell. And a lot of coaches really respect him. I think he's definitely not done wherever he's going. Another coach to be on the lookout to be a future head coach before he's done in his career in football. But going to players wise, first name that comes to me off the bat, I've got to go Jaleel McRae. Just hearing too much good things about him in the spring. Got a little bit of time last year, but he's also put on some pounds. He's actually lost a little bit of weight, and he's going to move over to a Will, and then his backup will be Mike, from what I've heard. And then also go to Deloach. They came in together. Kalen Deloach is going to get a lot of playing time there too. And then you go to maybe some other guys. You go to also Amari Gaynor, who's kind of like your H-back, but also on defense, you can use him in different kind of packages to rush the quarterback. Come off as a DN. He played a little bit. He played it for his rest of his years in high school. I played against him. He played at weak side defensive end, so he's a very fast, quick, and shifty guy there. But Emmett Rice is probably my most, if I were to pick a guy that I think is just going to really wreak some havoc, Emmett Rice is by far your hardest hitter, most physical guy. Emmett Rice has packed on another 10 or 15 pounds since the offseason has started. He looks good. He's in shape. He came in at the size of a DB, I swear. He came in at like 210. I swear he couldn't have been 210, maybe like 205. He came in looking like a DB, but now he's up to 225. He's built. Like I said, he's one of the most physical guys on the team. He looks good. If he can stay out of injuries and that bug there, he could have a really, really, really solid season for Florida State. I'm excited to see him get out there and play. True freshman-wise, Steven Dix Jr., I'm pretty sure I've talked about him enough on here and also on our podcast. I'm really, really looking forward to seeing the developmental there for him. He's added on 25 pounds. And now when we're talking 25, we're talking good muscle. I'm sure FSU fans, if you're watching this, you probably have gone to Twitter and you've seen either my tweets or the FSU football tweets or whatever, giving some praise on what he's looked on the transition of what he's looked like. It's all muscle. He looks like a baby Ernie Sims, and that's just great. That's just great stuff. That's how linebackers should be. And he's just a true freshman coming in. He has a chance of getting to whatever size they want him at. And that's another guy that I was told defensively, not to sleep on this guy as being a true freshman to get into the rotation very early on. Where all the talk was about how big he was getting and how solid and how much muscles, but we also got to go to the mental frame of it and see if he's in the right spots and whatnot. And so far, so good. Chris Marvin is really impressed by the true freshman Steven Dix Jr.
Steven Dix Jr., top 15 outside linebacker out of Orlando, Florida, top 300 player, top 240 player, regardless of position, 4-star again out of Orlando, top 37 player in the state, according to the composite. Emmett Rice, you mentioned, coming off a season in which he had 73 tackles, second most on the team. Logan, as we switch to secondary, Stanford Samuels coming off 7 passes defense, 2 interceptions. He's gone. But most of the production across the defense is back. Sports keep coming back. So does your chance to bet on them with our exclusive wagering partner, betonline.ag. Major League Baseball will finally start the summer this weekend as it's in full swing, and there's no shortage of ways to get in on the action. BetOnline has all the odds, futures, and props for you to bet on. And as sports starts to return, BetOnline has sat down with Eddie George from the NFL, Robert Ory, 7-time NBA champ, and Harold Reynolds from Major League Baseball to get their opinions on what it will be like playing without fans in what they've called Fandemic. Visit betonline.ag today to check out all the odds and up-to-date sports news. Don't forget to sign up and take advantage of all the welcome back to sports bonuses. BetOnline, your online wagering experts.
This is a position group that I think has been slacking the last couple of years. If you think about Florida State, you do think DBU. Recruits still say it in their interviews. DBU, ESPN puts Florida State up there with LSU and other cats and Ohio State. But it's been slacking the last couple of seasons. As fans, that's just a thing that's you've had to watch guys get burnt or not know where they're going, or you're used to seeing arms out, blaming other people. That's just how it's been in Tallahassee, and it's been brutal to watch. There hasn't been any doesn't feel like there's been coaching there. It's been piss poor. So you bring in Marcus Woodson, who obviously has had a good track record, and it's pretty good so far on the trail, bringing 5-star or bringing some good recruits into Florida State, and in his past, really good relationships with players too. And you got to hope that he is able to develop. That's the same thing that has to go with the offensive line and the linebackers is develop. It's not as brutal as offensive line and linebackers, but we've got to see some execution. The only thing savoring the defensive back group not going to the brutalness of the offensive line and linebackers is because you're bringing in rich talent, and that's just what good talent's going to do. They're going to figure out how to make plays, but it's been tough. If you wouldn't have had this talent coming in and this richness, then it would be an embarrassment. It's been bad the last couple of seasons. So guys that are returning, obviously Asante Samuel Jr. I get those two mixed up all the time, but Asante Samuel Jr. I've argued with Jason on this before on our show. I think he's a guy that has the potential to be one of the best corners in college football. Whenever I'd go to practices, he would be that number one guy as a true freshman, being that number one guy that was a trash talking and backing it up too, but having that energy to kind of get the practices going a little bit. And that's something that you need. That's something at FSU that has been slacking for a while now. But that's what that's what you're used to having in that backfield at FSU is someone chirping at you, talking trash to the offense. and get into your ears and aggravating you. You got to aggravate the wide receiver. And, I'm not just talking crap out of my mouth here. Look at Jalen Ramsey. I mean, man would never shut his mouth, but he backed it up. Now he's one of the best cornerbacks in college football. Derwin James, one of the best safeties, up-and-coming safeties, has the potential to be a future Hall of Famer for what everybody's projecting. Yeah, he said a few things on the field, and he was able to back it up. You could even go back to the earlier days too. LaMarcus Joyner, he's not a big tweeter or Instagrammer like Jalen Ramsey or Derwin James, but LaMarcus Joyner had his time back there talking crap. If I could cuss, I would. But he's had his time. He did his dirtiness at FSU. So Asante Samuel Jr. is going to fit that role. I think he's a lot of people might not remember too much about him last year because it just wasn't talked about. The announcers didn't have to say much about him because he was taking care of his job. If you're not seeing the DB, if the announcers are talking about him a lot during the game, things probably aren't going that well. If he's able to grab an interception here and there, then good job. But if you're covering your guy and you don't see him for the game, and you're like, wait, did Asante Samuel play today? It's probably a good sign. So then you got to go to your other guy, who's going to be your number two, a guy that transferred from FAU. Miko Dotson led the season last year in the entire country in interceptions. He's a stud. He's really shifty. He's going to be your number two, probably corner. If not, you kind of move around you see where Akeem Dent or maybe like a true freshman Damori Tate. You move these guys around. Even Isaiah Bolden, you got to figure out who that true number two guy is going to be. We've heard some things of Travis Jay, who I've talked very highly on, of who could maybe come in there and maybe play a corner or move around. It all really depends. That's something that I wish we would have had more answers on during the spring, because it's always loaded at Florida State. The defensive back unit there's always guys moving here and there and everywhere, but the cornerback position group should start off Asante Samuel Jr., and then it gets really interesting. Is it a bad thing? No, but you got to figure out whoever the number two guy is, it's going to be a great pick because the competition is going to be so rich, and it's going to be the right guy for the job. And that's going to be between like an Akeem Dent, Miko Dotson, Isaiah Bolden, or maybe a true freshman look at Damari Tate. But I'm really excited to see Miko Dotson. I think he's got the right mentality, and like I said, led the nation in interceptions last year at FAU. It's promising.
Now, your number one recruit in the 2020 class and your fourth rated recruit, according to the 247 Sports Composite, both in the secondary. Damari Tate, cornerback, fourth rated in the nation out of Orlando, sixth rated player in the state, top 35 player. Jadarius Green McKnight, also a safety, number 22 at his position. So maybe you get it seems like you're pretty well set at the corner position, where these guys aren't necessarily getting starting jobs or vying this early in their careers, but maybe they get on the field, get some playing time.
Yeah, and one thing to know about Damari Tate, he's already got a pretty decent build on him too. He's a kind of not a lanky guy, but he's kind of got the lankiness, I guess you can say, attributes from a Jalen Ramsey type. Although he's going to be definitely going down as kind of a corner more than safety. He'll stay down there more than anything. Of course, Jalen Ramsey was great and was solid and safety, and then moved down to corner throughout a lot of his career and football alone. But Damari Tate was reaching into that 5-star status. I know a lot of people were worried about stars and all that kind of stuff, but he was getting a lot of praise, to where a lot of people were thinking he was going to reach that 5-star status. During camps, he was impressing a lot of people, and I think it was just a little bit too late for him to reach that 5-star status. So I think Florida State is bringing in a stud guy, and like we always talk about, Florida State is going to bring in talent. It's all about developing, and we've got to see Coach Woodson be strict on these guys. We got to stop. Florida State's got to stop the blaming. That goes to coaching too. Maybe the guys are being put in the wrong positions, but the whole, putting your arms out like that, something's wrong there. And, things like that should be fixed. And hopefully that also goes from Woodson and also to Adam Fuller too. This is probably where you have your most true and experienced talent. So you're bringing back Jaden Lars Woodby who obviously had a season-ending injury, was really tough. You know, the team really hurt losing him. He was a leader, and he's just a really good guy too, and human being. So losing him was tough, but he's also a really talented player coming from the West Coast. Willie Taggart was able to snag him during his time and tenure at Florida State. So Jaden Lars-Woodby is your expected guy to kind of be your buck or weak side safety. Brendan Gann and maybe Travis Jay. That's why I'm trying to say Travis Jay could go to corner. He could go to safety. We just didn't get to see freaking spring. That's why it's so irritating for people covering sports teams, and definitely football right now in college football. We didn't get to have a spring to go watch them or hear things or hear what's going on inside practices. We only had 3 practices, one that had pads. So Brendan Gann is a really physical guy. Him and Emmett Rice are your most physical players going into the season. Maybe Steven Dix Jr. I'll let you have a chance to tell me that I'm wrong if we're halfway through the season and you're blowing kids out of their pads. But Brendan Gann and Travis Jay could be that backup role for that buck weak side safety. And then we're going to strong safety. One of the best safeties returning in the country is Hamza Nasruddin. He obviously was injured after the Florida game. Didn't know if he could go to the NFL. I think he could have, but he decides to stick with Florida State. He's just a tackle machine hawk. He leads about every game. During the Florida game, he might have, blown the record sheets out of the water by how many tackles. Announcers couldn't get enough of them. And so he injures, I believe, his ankle then, or I can't really remember what it was, but he got injured, maybe a little knee injury. And so he's had a full, good recovery. He's out there working out. He's expected. He's on a lot of award watch lists, Mark, and I think a lot of people really respect him on the team. And he's just a ball hawk, and he's not a ball hawk, but he's able to go find the ball, tackle east to west, north and south, and find these guys. He just finds himself to the ball, and that's something that is going to be huge for Adam Fuller this upcoming season, and not letting those plays get away from him. And I think Florida State's going to put him in a good spot to be successful to get into that top 3 round of an NFL team after it's all said and done. And then the other 2 guys that might be behind him, Cyrus Fagan and Raymond Woody, both have a chance there to get in some good playing time. So like I said, it's tough to kind of project. I think it's kind of more tough to project the defense than the offense, just because there's so much talent there, and we didn't get to have a spring, and we didn't get to see who really showed out, and we didn't get to see the early enrollees as much as we really wanted to. And now this whole coronavirus thing is going on, and we don't, some guys might not be able to go to workouts. So it's tough to really project where these cats are going to be at. But that's kind of like a little guess here and there on where all that talent's going to be. It should be a top 25 defense. Adam Fuller has had a lot of respect, and a lot of national writers and former coaches and current coaches think really highly of him. Can he bring this defense up from a kind of a crap show the last couple of seasons? There should be some optimism there. There's just too much talent to work with, just too much.
There's only about typically 10 players per conference that rack up 100 tackles. So Nasruddin, one of those guys in the ACC, 101 last year, 22 against Boston College. That's a crazy number. You don't see that very often. Also, Lars-Woodby, when you mentioned him, I remember when he was being recruited, Florida State took him away from Ohio State and USC, and he was one of the prized recruits in the nation. So it's going to be fun to watch him hopefully play and suit up for an entire season. Logan Robinson, Knoll Game Day. We have a great time every Tuesday night, so we want you to jump on in, regardless of whether you follow Florida State, whoever it is. Jump in here every Tuesday night, 7 o'clock Eastern time for Florida State Live. And we just broke down the defense. We'll come back at some point in the next few weeks to talk special teams and look at the coaching staff as well. Logan, it's been a good time. Appreciate the breakdown, the analysis.
Yes, appreciate it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button.